Some roads don't appear on any map. They wind through places that exist in the margins between towns, in forgotten spaces where civilization gave up and turned back. On these roads, travelers sometimes vanish without explanation, without witnesses, without a trace. A sedan sits abandoned on a foggy backroad in Montana. The engine is still running. The driver's door hangs open. On the passenger seat, a phone continues recording, capturing nothing but empty forest and silence. The keys remain in the ignition. A half-finished coffee sits in the cup holder, still warm. But the driver is gone, vanished somewhere between 1 mile marker and the next, on a stretch of road that takes 3 minutes to travel. Search teams would comb these woods for weeks. They would find nothing. No footprints leading away. No signs of struggle. Just an empty vehicle on an empty road, as if the driver simply ceased to exist. This is one of 5 documented disappearances. 5 cases spanning 4 years and 4 states. 5 backroads that wind through America's loneliest places. 5 travelers who discovered that some roads demand a toll that can never be repaid. Tonight, the story follows these roads into darkness, examining the evidence, the patterns, the impossible details that investigators can't explain. And it asks the question that haunts everyone who studies these cases: what's waiting at the end of roads that shouldn't exist? Welcome to The Faint Whisper. Tonight, we unravel the mystery behind 5 disappearances on remote backroads. Between 2019 and 2023, 5 individuals vanished on remote rural roads across the American West and Midwest. Unlike typical missing persons cases, these disappearances share disturbing similarities that have baffled investigators and defied conventional explanation. The victims were a GPS surveyor, a family of 4, an experienced delivery driver, a college student, and a private investigator researching the previous cases. None knew each other. None traveled the same roads. Yet each vanished in eerily similar circumstances. All disappeared during late night or early morning hours. All were last seen or tracked on rural backroads with minimal traffic. All left behind vehicles in inexplicable locations or conditions. And in every case, the last recorded communications contained references to roads that appeared where none should exist. Mile markers in impossible sequences, and the unsettling sensation of being watched from the darkness beyond their headlights. State and local authorities investigated each case independently, unaware of the patterns connecting them. It wasn't until 2024, when a data analyst reviewing missing persons reports noticed the correlations, that these 5 cases were linked together. What that analyst discovered would lead to a recommendation that certain rural routes be officially flagged for enhanced patrols. That recommendation was quietly rejected. Too many questions it couldn't answer. Too many details that shouldn't be possible. Case 1. The Cartographer's Route. Marcus Webb was a professional GPS surveyor for TerraMap Solutions, a tech company that specialized in mapping remote and rural areas for navigation systems. For 6 years, Marcus had driven thousands of miles of backroads, logging coordinates, verifying routes, and ensuring that even the most isolated dirt paths were accurately represented in digital maps. He was methodical, experienced, and proud of his perfect safety record. Marcus never got lost. He couldn't afford to. His reputation depended on it. On October 14, 2019, Marcus sent an excited voice message to his wife Sarah at 9:47 p.m. He'd found what looked like an unmapped shortcut on Hollow Creek Road in Montana, not on any of his databases or county records. It was like someone had simply forgotten it existed. He planned to document it quickly, log the coordinates, and be back at his hotel by midnight. That message was the last time anyone heard Marcus Webb's voice, but his equipment kept recording. Marcus's vehicle was outfitted with 3 GPS trackers, 2 dashboard cameras, and a laptop that continuously logged his position. The data they captured shouldn't be possible. According to the GPS logs, Marcus turned onto an unmarked dirt road at 10:03 p.m. For the next 42 minutes, his vehicle traveled in patterns that violate basic physics. The data shows him driving in loops within loops, his position jumping between coordinates that are miles apart, sometimes registering his vehicle in two locations simultaneously. At 10:31 p.m., the laptop's audio recording captured Marcus's voice again. But this time there was no excitement, only confusion. He mentioned passing the same mailbox 3 times, with his GPS showing north, but his compass reading east. The road should have connected back to Hollow Creek by now, but he kept finding more road, just more road. The mile markers were counting backwards. He'd started at marker 7, then 6, then suddenly saw marker 11. The dashboard camera footage shows what Marcus saw: fog rolling in, thick and low, reducing visibility to barely 20 feet. His headlights illuminate nothing but dirt road and pine trees, but careful observation reveals something impossible. The same tree appears in the footage 6 times, identifiable by a lightning scar on its trunk and a broken lower branch. Each time, it's in a different position relative to the road, as if the landscape itself is rearranging while Marcus drives. At 10:45, Marcus's speed increased dangerously. The GPS shows him reaching 70 miles per hour on a dirt road. The laptop recorded him shouting coordinates into his phone, trying to guide himself out. But the coordinates he was reading didn't match what the GPS displayed. He was reading numbers from the mile markers, insisting he was at mile 4, despite driving away from town. At exactly 3:47 a.m., every piece of electronic equipment in Marcus Webb's vehicle shut down simultaneously. GPS trackers, cameras, laptop stop. Even his phone, all ceased functioning at the same instant. When the devices powered back on, 2 minutes later, they were recording again. But Marcus was gone. His vehicle was found 3 days later by a forestry service worker, parked 40 miles from Marcus's last known location on a different road entirely, positioned perfectly between 2 trees as if deliberately placed there. The vehicle faced east. Marcus had been heading north. Inside, investigators found Marcus's equipment in the seat, his wallet in the center console, his laptop still running, and displaying a map covered in coordinate markers that formed no recognizable pattern. The last entry in his log file, timestamped at 3:47 a.m., consisted of a single repeated phrase: "The road remembers, the road remembers, the road remembers." Marcus hadn't typed those words. The laptop's keystroke log showed no activity. After 10:44 p.m., search teams combed the area for weeks with bloodhounds, helicopters equipped with thermal imaging, and volunteers walking grid patterns through dense woodland. They found no trace of Marcus Webb, no footprints leading from the vehicle, no disturbed earth, no signs of human presence beyond the car itself. When investigators tried to verify Marcus's route and locate the unmarked road where he'd turned off Hollow Creek Road, they arrived at the coordinates he'd logged at 10:03 up to find only unbroken forest, no road, no tire tracks, no gap in the trees, just dense Montana woodland that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Local rangers pulled out historical maps, some dating back to the 1800s, and found it on a surveyor's map from 1887 to a road marked as Old Loggers Cut, running through the exact coordinates Marcus had logged. County records showed that road had been reclaimed by the forest in 1923. The map notation beside the road contained a single word written in faded ink: unreliable. Marcus Webb's case remains officially unsolved. His family has never stopped searching, but the rangers who patrol that sector of Montana woodland have a policy now: they don't go out there after dark. When asked why, they simply say that some roads know where they're going, and travelers might not. Case 2. The Vanishing Family. The Morrison family loved road trips. Michael and Sarah Morrison had been married for 12 years and their 2 children, Emma and Jake, ages 9 and 7, had crossed more state lines than most adults. They documented their travels on social media, posting photos from roadside attractions, quirky diners, and scenic overlooks across America. In August of 2020, the Morrisons were driving from California to Texas, taking their time, enjoying the journey. They had a rule. Whenever they saw an interesting backroad, they'd take it, just to see where it led. Sarah called it choosing adventure. On August 23rd, somewhere in the Arizona desert, they chose a road that would lead them somewhere they could never return from. The last confirmed sighting of the Morrison family was at a gas station outside Sedona, Arizona, at 1:47 p.m. The attendant, Robert Chen, remembered them clearly because of what they asked him. Michael came in with a paper map, pointing to the highway and asking if there was a scenic route that would get them to Flagstaff by evening. Robert told him to stick to the interstate, that the back roads out there could be tricky if you didn't know them. But Sarah was excited about adventure. She asked about something called Route 77B, saying she'd seen a sign for it a few miles back. Robert told her there was no such route, not on any map he'd seen in 40 years working that station. She showed him a photo on her phone. There it was, a wooden sign, weathered and old, with 77B carved into it, and an arrow pointing west. Robert insisted that sign didn't exist, but there it was in her photo, clear as day. He told them not to take it, explaining that sometimes signs appear in the desert that shouldn't be there, that the heat plays tricks. The kids were listening and got quiet, but Sarah laughed, said they were superstitious, and the family left heading west. The photo Sarah showed Robert would later be recovered from her social media account, posted at 1:52 It shows that weathered wooden road sign at a dusty intersection, with the caption, "Adventure time, taking the road less traveled." That would be the family's final post, but their phones continued transmitting data. Cell tower records show the Morrison family's phones pinging towers for the next 6 hours, tracing a circular pattern through an area that measures approximately 12 miles across. The route they traced should have taken 20 minutes to complete. Instead, they spent 6 hours driving it over and over, as if caught in a loop they couldn't escape. At 7:14 p.m., Sarah Morrison sent a text message to her sister in California. The message was simple, just 4 words: "The trees are watching us." There are no trees in that part of Arizona, just scrub brush, cactus, and open desert. Sarah's sister tried calling back immediately, but the call went to voicemail. She tried again every few minutes for the next hour. Finally, at 8:03 a.m., someone answered, but the line was silent, except for the sound of breathing and distant wind. Sarah's sister heard a child's voice, very faint and far away, asking, "Mommy, why is the road doing that?" Before the call ended abruptly, she contacted authorities immediately. At 6:47 a.m. the following morning, a long-haul trucker named Dale Morrison spotted their minivan while making a routine delivery run. The vehicle was parked at a rest stop along Highway 40, 30 miles from where they'd last pinged a cell tower. The rest stop was a standard concrete pavilion with picnic tables and restrooms, the kind you find along any major highway. Except this rest stop shouldn't have been there. Dale drove that route twice a week and had for 8 years. He knew every rest stop, every pull-off, every landmark. This pavilion wasn't there when he'd driven past 2 days before. Yet there it was, looking like it had been there for decades. The minivan was parked perfectly between the lines. Engine was cold. Inside, he could see kids' tablets on the back seats, still playing cartoons. The battery should have died hours ago, but they were playing, just playing on loop. He opened the driver's door, and the dome light came on. Nobody inside, but he could smell coffee, like someone had just been drinking it. The cup holder had 4 drinks, all still cold. The radio was on, mostly static, But every few seconds, he'd hear voices, kids laughing, a woman singing, then just static again. When police arrived, they found exactly what I'll described. An abandoned vehicle with no signs of struggle, no indication of distress. Behind the vehicle, investigators found footprints. 4 sets, 2 adults and 2 children. The prints led from the minivan toward the tree line beyond the rest stop. They were clear in the dust, well-defined, easy to follow, walking in single file with the children's prints between the adults. The forensic team followed the trail for exactly 47 feet. Then the prints simply stopped. Not faded, not obscured, stopped. As if the family had vanished mid-step. Search dogs were brought in. 3 different teams with dogs trained for different scenarios. All 3 teams had the same reaction when they reached the point where the footprints ended. The dogs refused to continue. They whimpered, backed away, and no amount of encouragement from their handlers could convince them to cross that invisible line. One dog laid down and howled. Another tried to bolt back to the vehicle. The third simply sat and stared into the trees, trembling. A search coordinator pulled out a compass to verify their direction. The needle spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. Another coordinator tried his compass with the same result. A third team member tried a digital compass on her phone. The app crashed. The search continued for 2 weeks, with helicopters, volunteer teams, and divers checking nearby reservoirs. They found nothing beyond those footprints that led nowhere. An archivist at the County Historical Society discovered a reference in local folklore to the road that walks. The legend, recorded by a traveling missionary in 1891, spoke of a trail used by indigenous peoples who believed it connected this world to another. The legend said that travelers who walked this road at certain times would step between the worlds and never return. Those who saw them vanish reported that the travelers showed no fear, no hesitation. They simply walked forward and ceased to be. The missionary's journal included approximate coordinates for where this legend was centered. When investigators plotted those coordinates on a modern map, they fell within the area where the Morrison family's cell phones had pinged for 6 hours. The missionary had added a personal note. He'd attempted to locate this road himself, driven by curiosity and a desire to disprove superstition. He found a wooden marker bearing symbols he couldn't identify. As he approached, he felt profound wrongness. The light seemed dim, though the sun was high. The air grew cold. He heard whispers in a language he didn't know. He turned back, writing, "Some roads are not meant for Christian souls. Some paths lead to places where God's light does not reach." 3 months later, Dale made his regular delivery run along Highway 40. He slowed as he approached the location where he'd found the minivan. The rest stop was gone. No pavilion, no picnic tables, no concrete pad, just empty desert and scrub brush, as if it had never existed. He pulled over and walked to where he remembered the pavilion standing. The ground showed no sign of construction or removal, just undisturbed earth and desert plants that looked decades old. But as he stood there, Dale noticed something: 4 sets of footprints, barely visible in the dust, leading from the roadside into the desert. 2 adults, 2 children. The prints led exactly 47 feet before they disappeared. The connection. For 2 years, these cases existed as separate tragedies in separate states, investigated by separate agencies with no reason to connect them. Marcus Webb in Montana, the Morrison family in Arizona. Each was filed as a missing persons case with unusual circumstances. Each investigation eventually went cold. In March 2022, a data analyst named Jennifer Vasquez was conducting a routine review of national missing persons reports for the FBI's database system. Her job was to identify statistical patterns that might connect seemingly unrelated cases. She was running a search for disappearances involving vehicles found abandoned in remote areas with broad parameters: rural locations, No signs of struggle. Personal belongings left behind. No body recovered. Her search returned 847 cases spanning 10 years. Jennifer began filtering the results, looking for additional commonalities: time of day, weather conditions, geographic clustering, demographics. As she worked through the data, 3 cases caught her attention. They shared an unusual number of similarities: disappearances occurring between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., electronic devices malfunctioning, or recording impossible data, references in final communications to roads or landscapes behaving strangely. She expanded her search parameters, and 2 more cases appeared. 5 total, all within a 3-year window. Jennifer contacted the investigating agencies in each case and requested their files. What arrived over the following weeks shook her belief in rational explanation. Spread across her office floor, the 5 cases revealed connections that shouldn't exist. Identical phrases appearing in separate communications. The road is moving. The trees are watching. It's waiting at the crossroads. GPS data showing impossible routes and simultaneous locations. Witnesses mentioning roads that didn't exist on maps. The most disturbing pattern emerged when Jennifer plotted all 5 disappearance locations on a map of the United States. At first glance, the locations seemed random, but when she connected the points in chronological order, they formed a shape, not a random shape, but a symbol. Jennifer had seen this symbol before in a graduate course on American folklore. It was a crossroads marker, used in various forms by different cultures throughout history, representing a meeting point between worlds, a place where boundaries became thin, where travelers could lose their way between one reality and another. Jennifer compiled her findings into a report recommending that certain rural routes be flagged in law enforcement databases, that signage be improved in remote areas, that cell tower coverage be expanded. Her recommendations were practical, focused on prevention. After 6 weeks of review by her supervisor, a regional director, and a committee, she received a response. Her recommendations were declined. The official reason cited insufficient evidence of criminal activity, no clear threat to public safety, and too many jurisdictional complications. But Jennifer received an unofficial email from the regional director, sent from a personal account late at night, containing a single sentence: "Some patterns are best left unacknowledged." Jennifer Vasquez left the FBI. 3 months later, she now works in private sector data analysis and doesn't talk about the 5 cases anymore. But sometimes, late at night, she pulls up that map with the 5 points connected, forming their impossible symbol, and wonders how many more points are waiting to be added. Case 3. The delivery driver. Emma Reeves had been driving for Pacific Coast Logistics for 12 years, mostly overnight routes, packages that needed to arrive by morning, medical supplies that couldn't wait, time-sensitive cargo that traveled while the world slept. She preferred the night shift. Less traffic, quieter roads, time to think. Emma knew the backroads of Oregon better than most people knew their own neighborhoods. She could navigate by landmarks invisible to other drivers and hadn't consulted a map in years. On the night of March 15, 2021, Emma was hauling medical equipment from Portland to Bend, a route she'd driven hundreds of times. She left the depot at 11:47 p.m. right on schedule. At 1:23 a.m., she was making good time, ahead of schedule by nearly 20 minutes on Highway 26, a familiar stretch through Mount Hood National Forest. The rain had intensified, but visibility was adequate. She radioed dispatch for a routine check-in, reporting she was passing mile marker 47 with conditions wet, but manageable. 3 minutes later, Emma's GPS alerted her to a route change. A fallen tree was blocking Highway 26 ahead. The system offered an alternate route, adding only 8 minutes to her trip. Emma accepted the detour. The GPS directed her onto Forest Service Road 42, a paved 2-lane backroad that paralleled the highway through denser forest. Emma had never taken this particular route, but Forest Service roads were well maintained. She had no concerns. Pacific Coast Logistics tracked all their vehicles in real time, using GPS systems that updated every 30 seconds. At 1:34 a.m., Emma's truck was traveling at 52 miles per hour on Forest Service Road 42, exactly where it should be. At 1:35 a.m., the GPS showed her speed had increased to 78 miles per hour, then 94, then 110. The dispatcher radioed with concern, noting high speed on Emma's tracker. Emma's voice came through the static, strained and scared. She insisted her speedometer showed 55, that she wasn't accelerating, but the road was moving. The pavement was shifting under her, visible in her headlights. A thunder crash, then more static. Emma shouted over the noise that there was something at the crossroads, that it was waiting. When the dispatcher asked what crossroads, there was no intersection on her route. For 3 miles, Emma's response was distant and hollow. "It knows my name." Then came a whisper barely audible, possibly wind through leaves or voices, before Emma's final words. "It knows my name." Emma's radio went silent. 1:43 a.m. Her GPS signal continued for another 47 seconds, showing her truck stationary. Then the tracker went offline. The dispatcher immediately contacted Oregon State Police. Within minutes, multiple units were en route to Emma's last known position. The first unit arrived at 2:17 a.m. and found Forest Service Road 42 exactly where it should be. Well-maintained, clear lane markings, regular signage, no fallen trees, no obstructions, and no sign of Emma's truck. At 6:52 a.m., as dawn broke over the forest, a Forest Service ranger found Emma's truck parked in a small clearing, 3 miles off Forest Service Road 42, deep in old-growth forest. To reach this location, Emma would have had to drive off-road through dense woodland, with no path, no trail, no possible route for a vehicle. Yet there the truck sat, parked perfectly between 2 massive Douglas fir trees facing east. The trees stood exactly 12 feet apart. Emma's truck was 14 feet wide. The ranger approached cautiously. The truck's engine was cold. The door unlocked. Inside, everything was in order. Emma's logbook on the passenger seat, her coffee in the cup holder, her phone mounted on the dashboard. But Emma was gone. The ranger picked up Emma's logbook. The entries were typical for the first part of the night, but the final pages told a different story. The handwriting became increasingly frantic. 1:35, turned around, road not right. 1:41, turned around again, same tree keeps appearing. 1:47, impossible, turned around 12 times. Still same stretch of road. 1:52, mile marker 7. Then mile marker 11. Then marker 3. Numbers make no sense. 2:03, road doesn't hint, just keeps going. More road, Gulf is more road. Then in letters so pressed into the paper they nearly tore through. 2:19, it's in the headlights. The rest of the page was blank, except for the final entry, written in perfectly calm handwriting at the bottom. 3:33, I understand now. The road was never taking me somewhere. It was taking me away. Emma's watch was found on the dashboard, still ticking. It had stopped at exactly 3:33 a.m., then started again. But the date display was wrong. It showed March 23rd, 8 days in the future. Forensic investigators documented everything. The truck's black box showed Emma had indeed reached speeds over 100 miles per hour, but the engine's RPM data indicated she never went above 55. The odometer had logged 87 additional miles since leaving the depot, though Emma's route should have been only 62 miles. The cargo was intact medical equipment, worth nearly $500,000, completely untouched. The truck showed no signs of damage, no indication it had driven through forest. The tires were clean, no mud or debris. The undercarriage showed no scratches from rough terrain. It was as if the truck had simply materialized in that clearing, placed gently between trees too close together to accommodate it. Search teams combed the area for 3 weeks and found no trace of Emma Reeves, no footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of wildlife activity. She had simply vanished from a locked truck in the middle of an impossible location. But 5 miles from where the truck was found, a barn camera had captured something strange. The footage showed headlights passing on the distant road at 2:47 a.m. Large vehicle headlights consistent with a delivery truck, moving from south to north for approximately 12 seconds. The location of this sighting was 5 miles due west of where Emma's truck was found. But according to GPS data, Emma's truck never traveled west. It had been moving east when it went offline. When investigators synced the barn camera footage with Pacific Coast Logistics GPS logs, they discovered the headlights passed the barn camera at exactly 12:00. The same moment Emma's truck GPS showed it stationary at coordinates 5 miles to the east. The same truck, captured in 2 locations simultaneously. Analysts enhanced the barn camera footage, zooming in on the passing headlights. In the final frame before the vehicle exits the shot, Emma's face is visible for less than a second through the rain-streaked windshield. But her expression haunts everyone who's seen the footage. She's not afraid, not confused. She looks understanding, as if she's finally realized something, her lips moving to form words the camera can't capture. 3 months after Emma disappeared, Pacific Coast Logistics received a package at their Portland depot with no return address or shipping label. Just a plain box left at the loading dock. Inside was Emma's driver's license, her company ID badge, and a road map of Oregon, marked with a single route drawn in red ink. The route started at Portland and ended at a location labeled only with coordinates, the clearing where Emma's truck had been found. On the back of the map, someone had written a message in Emma's handwriting. "I'm not lost. I'm exactly where the road wanted me to be. Don't try to find me. Some destinations can only be reached once." The postmark on the package's internal postal stamp was from Bend, Oregon, dated March 16th, 2021, the day after Emma disappeared. But the package arrived 3 months later. Forest Service Road 42 remains open and well-traveled, considered safe. But the Forest Service quietly installed additional signage after Emma's disappearance, warning drivers to stay on marked roads, to avoid stopping in unmarked areas, to report any unusual conditions immediately. Late-night drivers who take that route sometimes report strange things. Headlights that appear in their mirrors, but never get closer. Mile markers that seem to be in the wrong order. The feeling that the road behind them is different than the road ahead. Dispatch operators at Pacific Coast Logistics have a new protocol now. If a driver reports anything unusual, roads behaving strangely, impossible speeds, landscapes that don't make sense, they immediately instruct the driver to stop, shut off their engine, and wait for assistance. They never tell the drivers why. They just say it's company policy. But the operators know. They've all read Emma's file. They've all seen the footage. And they've all noticed something that wasn't included in the official report. In the enhanced barn camera footage, in that final frame showing Emma's face through the windshield, visible in the seat beside her, there's something else. A shadow. Human-shaped but wrong somehow. Sitting in the passenger seat that should have been empty. Emma Reeves was declared legally dead in 2023. Her family held a memorial service. Her truck was sold at auction. Her route was permanently reassigned. But sometimes, late at night, dispatch operators monitoring their GPS screens see something odd. A truck icon appearing briefly on Forest Service Road 42, traveling at impossible speeds, then vanishing. The identification number matches Emma's old truck. When operators report this to their supervisors, they're told it's a glitch. A system error. Nothing to worry about. But the glitch keeps happening. Always buoying. Between 1:30 and 3:33 a.m. Always on Forest Service Road 42. Always heading toward coordinates that lead to nowhere. Case 4. The Hitchhiker. David Park was 22 years old, a senior at the University of Montana, driving home to Lexington, Kentucky for Thanksgiving break. It was a long drive over 2,000 miles, but David enjoyed road trips. He'd loaded his car with snacks, made a playlist of his favorite podcasts, and planned to drive straight through with minimal stops. His roommate, Tyler Chen, thought he was crazy for driving instead of flying. But David liked the freedom of the open road, liked being alone with his thoughts. On November 22nd, 2022, somewhere in eastern Kentucky, David made a decision that would lead him to a fate that still haunts everyone who investigates his case. He picked up a hitchhiker. David's roommate Tyler received a text message at 9:34 p.m. Just picked up an old guy hitching outside Moorhead. Feels wrong to leave someone out here this late. He seems harmless. I'll keep you posted. Tyler replied immediately, warning David to be careful. David responded with a thumbs-up emoji. It would be the last normal communication Tyler received from his friend. At 11:47 p.m., Tyler's phone began receiving voicemails from David's number, not calls, just voicemails appearing without the phone ringing. 7 voicemails over the next 3 hours, each stranger than the last. The first voicemail showed David casually asking the hitchhiker how far he was headed. The old man's gravelly voice responded that he was going as far as the road took him, that he'd been walking these routes a long time, long before David was born, long before the car was built. When David laughed uncomfortably, the old man continued, "The old roads remember. They remember everyone who's traveled them, every soul who's passed this way. They keep a tally, you might say." The second voicemail, timestamped 12:23 a.m., had different background noise. No engine sound, but footsteps on gravel and wind. David sounded confused, asking if they were stopped, not remembering pulling over. The old man explained that time moves different on certain stretches, asking if David had ever noticed how some drives feel longer than they should. How you can be on a road for what feels like hours, but you've barely covered any distance. That's the road deciding, the old man said. Deciding whether you're worthy to pass through, whether you should reach your destination, or whether you should stay. When David nervously asked, "Stay where?" the response was chilling. "Here, between. In the places that aren't quite anywhere." Tyler listened to these voicemails in idle time as they terrified. He tried calling David back repeatedly, but the calls went straight to voicemail. He sent text messages with no response. Growing increasingly worried, Tyler stayed up through the night, his phone clutched in his hand, waiting for the next message. The third voicemail at 1:15 a.m. showed audio quality degrading, with increasing static. David's voice was tight with suppressed panic, asking how much further to Lexington, insisting they should be there by now, after driving for hours. The old man asked, "Depends on what you're running from." David insisted he wasn't running from anything, that he was just going home. The old man chuckled. Everyone's running from something. That's why roads exist, to carry people away from what they can't face. But sometimes the road circles back, makes you face it anyway. The car engine sounded wrong in the recording, too fast, too rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. David's voice rose, saying nothing looked familiar, asking where they were. The old man replied they were on Salvation Ridge, had been on Salvation Ridge the whole time. The road likes it here, likes the curves, the hills, the dark spaces between the trees. Sometimes it just keeps going, looping back on itself, a snake eating its tail. When David protested that this didn't make sense, the old man said, "Sense is for places that follow rules, son. This road makes its own rules." By the time the fourth voicemail arrived at 3:52 a.m., Tyler had contacted David's parents and local police, but without a specific location, there was little authorities could do except monitor the situation. The fourth voicemail had no car engine sounds, only wind and footsteps. David was breathing hard, saying they needed gas. That the tank was reading empty, but it was 3/4 full an hour ago. The old man explained that miles have weight there, that they weigh on the vehicle and the soul, that every mile traveled takes something from you. There were footsteps on what sounded like a wooden surface creaking. David asked why they were on a bridge, insisting there was no bridge on this road. "There's always been a bridge," the old man said. "You just never needed to see it before." After a pause with only wind sounds, the old man's voice became softer, almost kind. "Do you know why people pick up hitchhikers, David? Really know?" David said it was to help someone. That's what you tell yourself. But it's loneliness, usually. The fear of being alone on dark roads. So you take a stranger into your vehicle, into that small moving space, because even an unknown companion is better than solitude. But sometimes you pick up something that's been waiting, something that needed a way to travel. When David whispered, asking who he was, the old man repeated, "I'm the last face people see before the road takes them. I'm the warning they ignore. I'm the choice they make when they stop and open that door." The fifth voicemail at 3:36 a.m. was the shortest, static, heavy breathing, and a soft click, like a door closing. David's voice was barely audible and resigned. "Tyler, if you're listening to these, I don't know where I am. I don't know if I'm anywhere. But I want you to know it's not scary. Not anymore. It's almost peaceful. The old man, yes, is gone now. Or maybe he was never really here. Maybe he was just the road's way of talking." After a pause with wind, David continued, his voice filled with wonder. "There's something beautiful out here. Something I can't explain. The fog has cleared, and I can see where the road goes. Where it's always gone. And Tyler, everyone I've been looking for is here. Everyone who's ever gotten lost. We're all here together, and we're not lost at all. We've been found." Footsteps followed, a door opening, then silence. The voicemail continued for 30 more seconds, with only wind and distant sounds that might be voices or might be nothing. The sixth voicemail at 3:18 a.m. contained no voices, only ambient sound, footsteps on gravel, wind through leaves, and something else, a rhythmic sound almost musical, like wind chimes made from bone. The seventh and final voicemail arrived at 3:33 a.m. with crystal clear audio and no static. The old man's voice spoke directly with no background noise. "He's gone where he needed to go, where the road decided he belonged. Don't mourn him, Tyler. Don't search for him. Some paths only go one direction. Some travelers can't turn back." After a pause, he continued, "But don't worry. When your time comes, when you're on your dark road alone, I'll be there too. Thumb out, waiting. We're all waiting." Soft laughter followed before the voicemail ended. David Park's car was found the next morning by a Kentucky state trooper conducting a routine patrol. The vehicle was parked on a bridge, the old Covington River Bridge, a structure that local historians claimed had been torn down in 1974. But there it stood, weathered wood and rusted metal, spanning a river gorge that maps showed had been filled in decades ago for a highway expansion. The trooper approached cautiously. David's car sat in the exact center of the bridge, engine off, doors locked. Through the windows he could see David's phone on the dashboard, his backpack in the passenger seat, his wallet in the cup holder. But no David. No keys in the ignition. No explanation for how the car had been locked from the outside. When investigators arrived, they documented everything. The car showed no signs of .43. David's belongings were untouched. His phone showed the 7 voicemails sent to Tyler, but the phone's call log showed no outgoing calls. The voicemails appeared in the sent folder, as if by magic, created without David ever dialing Tyler's number. The phone's location data showed David's route. He had been driving on Route 60, a major state highway. But at 9:34 p.m., his route deviated. The GPS showing him turning onto a road labeled only as Old Salvation Ridge Road. When investigators tried to locate Old Salvation Ridge Road, they found no such route in any database. County records showed a Salvation Ridge had existed, a treacherous mountain pass used in the 1800s, but it had been abandoned after numerous accidents, and by 1920, it had been reclaimed by forest. Yet David's phone showed him traveling this road for over 4 hours, covering what should have been a 15-minute stretch, looping through coordinates that formed no recognizable pattern. A local historian, researching David's case, discovered something disturbing in newspaper archives from 1923. A brief article buried on page 7 of the Lexington Herald reported the disappearance of a traveling salesman on what was then called Salvation Ridge Road. The article mentioned that the salesman's car was found on the old Covington River Bridge, his belongings inside, but he had vanished. Witnesses reported seeing him pick up an elderly hitchhiker earlier that evening. The article concluded with a quote from a local sheriff. The old-timers say Salvation Ridge is cursed, that an old man walks that road, forever searching for a ride home, and those who pick him up never reach their own homes again. Similar reports appeared in archives from 1947, 1968, and 1989. Always the same basic details: a lone driver, an elderly hitchhiker, a disappearance on or near Salvation Ridge Road, vehicles found on a bridge that shouldn't exist. The intervals between incidents weren't random. They occurred in cycles, roughly every 23 to 25 years, and 2022, when David disappeared, was exactly 23 years after the 1989 case. David Park's family never stopped searching. Tyler organized search parties. Volunteers combed hundreds of miles of Kentucky backroads. Psychics were consulted. Rewards were offered. Nothing produced results. In 2024, David's parents held a memorial service. Though no death certificate was ever issued, Tyler gave a eulogy, speaking about his friend's kindness, his adventurous spirit, his willingness to help strangers. At the end of the service, an elderly man approached Tyler. He wasn't someone Tyler recognized, wasn't on the guest list. He was weathered, ancient-looking, with eyes that seemed to have seen far too much. The old man said, "Your friend was kind. That's why he stopped. Kindness is rare on lonely roads. The road appreciates kindness." Tyler asked if he knew David. The old man replied, "I know everyone who travels Salvation Ridge. I've known them all, and I'll know the next one too, when their time comes." 23 years is a long time to wait, but the road is patient, and I'm patient too. When Tyler asked what he meant and who he was, the old man simply walked away. Tyler ran after him, but when he reached the parking lot, it was empty. Security camera footage from the funeral home was reviewed later. The cameras showed Tyler talking to empty air. No elderly man appeared in any frame. That night, Tyler received one final voicemail from David's old phone number. The number had been disconnected for over a year, reassigned to a different customer, but the voicemail came through nonetheless. David's voice was peaceful and distant. "Tyler, I know you'll never understand this, and I'm sorry, but I want you to know I'm not suffering. The road isn't cruel. It's just necessary. It connects things that need to be connected, places that shouldn't exist but do, people who are lost but don't want to be found." After a pause, David continued, "Don't pick up hitchhikers, Tyler. Not on empty roads. Not at night. Not when you're alone. Because he's always there, waiting. And once you open that door, once you let him in, the road decides where you go, not you. I have to go now. The bridge is beautiful at sunrise, You'd love it here. Everyone does eventually. Tyler tried to trace the call. It originated from a cell tower in eastern Kentucky, servicing an area that included what was once Salvation Ridge. But according to service provider records, that tower had been decommissioned in 2019. David Park's case remains open. His car was impounded, then released to his family. His parents eventually donated it to a charity. The vehicle was auctioned and purchased by a college student in Ohio. 3 months later, that student reported seeing an elderly man hitchhiking on a rural Ohio road late at night. She said she almost stopped, but something made her keep driving. She said the old man smiled as she passed and raised his thumb again. Still waiting. Always waiting. Case 5. The Investigator. Rebecca Torres had built her career on finding answers. As a private investigator, specializing in missing persons cases, she had a success rate that bordered on legendary. Families hired her when police investigations stalled. Insurance companies consulted her on suspicious disappearances. She was meticulous, rational, and utterly convinced that every mystery had an explanation. In March 2023, Rebecca was contacted by Sarah Morrison's sister, the aunt of the family that had vanished in Arizona 3 years earlier. The police investigation had gone cold. The family needed closure. They needed someone who wouldn't stop looking. Rebecca took the case. Then, as she began researching the Morrison disappearance, she discovered the other cases: Marcus Webb, Emma Reeves, David Park. Different states, different circumstances, but patterns emerged. Patterns that Rebecca couldn't ignore. For 6 months, Rebecca became obsessed. She interviewed witnesses, analyzed GPS data, studied meteorological records, consulted with experts in psychology, geography, and folklore. She mapped every detail, looking for the rational explanation she knew must exist. But the more she learned, the less sense it made. Roads that appeared and disappeared, time distortions, electronic equipment malfunctioning in identical ways, and always that 3:33 a.m. timestamp. Rebecca's apartment became a command center. One wall covered entirely with maps and photos, connected by red string. Another wall filled with timeline charts. Her laptop displayed overlapping GPS routes, search patterns, meteorological data. Her friends grew concerned. Rebecca stopped returning calls. She canceled social commitments. She talked about proving that these disappearances had a logical cause. Magnetic anomalies, perhaps. Geological formations causing temporal distortions. Mass hallucinations triggered by infrasound from wind patterns. A friend called one night, worried. "Rebecca, you need to take a break. You're not sleeping. You're not eating. This case is consuming you." Rebecca's tired but determined voice replied, "I'm close, Diane. I'm so close. There's a pattern here. Something connecting all the 5 thingies, if I can just find it." When her friends suggested these might just be random tragedies, Rebecca insisted, "They're not random. Nothing is ever random. There's always an explanation. Always." In September 2023, Rebecca made her decision. She would retrace the routes herself. She would drive the roads where each victim disappeared, document everything with multiple cameras and GPS trackers, and find the rational explanation everyone else had missed. She outfitted her vehicle with redundant systems: 3 GPS trackers from different manufacturers, 4 cameras covering every angle, a satellite phone, emergency beacons, and a live streaming system that would broadcast her journeys to a secure server. Rebecca filed a detailed itinerary with local authorities in each state. She established check-in protocols with her emergency contacts. She prepared for every contingency she could imagine. What she couldn't prepare for was the road itself. Rebecca began her journey on September 15th, planning to visit each disappearance site in chronological order. Montana first, then Arizona, Oregon, Kentucky, and finally, she would attempt to identify any connecting routes between them. The first 3 locations yielded nothing on it. Rebecca drove the roads, recorded her observations, found no anomalies. She began to feel vindicated. These were just ordinary roads where extraordinary tragedies had occurred. On day 4 in the evening, Rebecca's live stream broadcast her confident voice. This is day 4 of documentation. I'm currently on Route 60 in Kentucky, approaching the area where David Park was last tracked. Weather is clear, visibility excellent, all systems functioning normally. So far, I've found no evidence of geographical or meteorological anomalies that would explain the disappearance. My working theory is that each case involved individual circumstances, medical episodes, accidents, perhaps even foul play, that weren't properly investigated due to the remote locations. I'll be conducting overnight surveillance at 3 key locations to monitor any unusual. A GPS alert beeped. Rebecca's tone shifted. Hold on. GPS is showing an unmarked road ahead. No designation. Not on my maps. This is interesting. I'm going to document this. It was 11:47 p.m. when Rebecca turned onto that unmarked road. Her live stream continued broadcasting, capturing everything her dashboard camera saw. For the first 10 minutes, nothing seemed unusual. A dirt road winding through forest. Standard topography. Normal conditions. Rebecca's voice remained professional, but with an edge of excitement. This road doesn't appear on any database, but it's clearly maintained. Recent grading, minimal vegetation encroachment. I'm documenting coordinates for later verification. This could be a private service road, or possibly GPS alerts sounded error tones following. Rebecca sounded puzzled. That's odd. GPS showing conflicting data. One tracker says I'm heading north, another says west. Third tracker is showing me stationary, but I'm clearly moving. Checking backup systems. Satellite phone has signal. Live stream still broadcasting. All cameras operational. This is likely just a technical glitch from all 3 GPS units began beeping in sequence, an error cascade. Rebecca's frustration was evident. Okay, all 3 GPS units are now malfunctioning. That's statistically improbable. I'm going to turn around and report this equipment failure. The sounds of her car slowing, putting into reverse, backing up followed. Then confusion entered her voice. Wait, this doesn't... I could swear there was a curve behind me. The road is straight now. Straight as far as I can see in my mirrors. I'm turning around. Right now. For the next 40 minutes, Rebecca's live stream showed her attempting to leave the unmarked road. But no matter which direction she drove, she remained on the same stretch of dirt road. Trees on both sides, moonlight filtering through branches, road continuing endlessly in both directions. Rebecca's breathing became audible, stress evident in her voice. At 12:23 a.m. This is the 3rd time I've passed that dead oak tree. I'm certain of it. Same lightning scar on the trunk. But that's impossible. I've been driving south for the past 15 minutes. I should be miles from that tree. Her car accelerated, engine straining. At 12:47 a.m., she said, attempting speed increase to cover distance faster. All cameras still recording. If anyone is monitoring this stream, my GPS coordinates when I entered this road were... She rattled off coordinates. Send assistance to those coordinates. Something is wrong with this location. The road it's not behaving normally. Her voice cracked slightly. God, I sound crazy. I sound like the reports I was trying to disprove. A mile marker appeared in the headlights. At 1:15 a.m., Rebecca whispered, mile marker 7. Then 6. Now I'm seeing marker 11. The markers are going backwards, then forwards. Then this isn't possible. This violates basic physical laws. Only engine noise and her breathing followed. At 1:47 a.m., her voice was steady but afraid. I've been parked for 10 minutes. The GPS shows I'm moving at 45 miles per hour, but my vehicle is in park. The engine is off. I'm sitting still. And yet the Jeep insists I'm driving. Something moved outside the vehicle, footsteps, movement through brush. Rebecca's voice at 2:03 a.m. was barely audible. There's something outside. Multiple somethings. I can see shapes in the trees, moving parallel to the car. They are keeping pace even though I'm not moving. They have headlights. I can see headlights behind the trees. But there's no road there. Just forest. Dense forest. How are there headlights in the forest? Viewers monitoring the live stream later reported seeing what Rebecca described. Lights moving through the forest, impossibly navigating between trees, maintaining formation, as if following invisible roads that only they could see. But more disturbing was what the viewers noticed that Rebecca hadn't mentioned. In the reflection of her rearview mirror, visible in the corner of the dashboard camera frame, there was a vehicle behind her, a delivery truck with headlights on, sitting motionless on a road where Rebecca was completely alone. At 2:47 a.m., a strange calmness settled into Rebecca's voice. I understand now. The interviews, the reports, the evidence, I was looking at it wrong. This isn't about geography or weather patterns or equipment malfunctions. The road is, it's alive. Not metaphorically, literally alive. It thinks, it chooses, it collects. All those other travelers, Marcus, the Morrisons, Emma, David, they weren't taken randomly. They were selected. The road evaluated them and decided they belonged here. In this space between spaces, a quiet laugh followed, almost relieved. And I came here looking for them. I came right to it. I presented myself for evaluation. God, the irony. I can see them now, all of them, standing at a crossroads ahead. Marcus with his surveying equipment. The Morrison family holding hands. Emma in her delivery uniform. David talking to that old man. They're waiting for me. They're not dead. They're not suffering. They're just elsewhere. In a place where roads lead to destinations that don't exist on any map. Where lost things go to be found. The sound of the car door unlocking. A hand on the door handle. At 3:15 a.m., Rebecca's voice was filled with wonder. I'm going to join them now. I'm going to stop looking for answers and become part of the question. To anyone watching this, don't try to find me. Don't try to understand this. Some phenomena can't be investigated. They can only be experienced. Sounds of Rebecca stepping out of the vehicle followed. At 3:33 a.m., her last words, the road knows where I belong. It's known all along. That's why it let me find it. Footsteps on gravel, walking away. The door closed itself. Rebecca's live stream continued for another 6 hours, broadcasting an empty vehicle interior. The cameras captured nothing but stillness. No movement. No sounds beyond wind and distant night creatures. At 9:33 a.m., the live stream ended abruptly, all 4 cameras simultaneously losing power, despite fully charged batteries. Rebecca Torres' vehicle was found 1 week later by a state forestry patrol. The location was a crossroads, 4 dirt roads, meeting at a perfect intersection in the middle of dense Montana wilderness. The crossroads appeared on maps from 1823, but had been marked as impassable and removed from official records in 1952. The Forest Service had no record of maintaining roads in that sector, yet there the crossroads stood, clear and well-defined, as if regularly traveled. Inside Rebecca's vehicle, investigators found her equipment functioning perfectly. Cameras full of footage, GPS devices full of data, her laptop open with her research files displayed. But there was one additional file, created at 3:34 a.m. on September 19th, 1 minute after Rebecca's last recorded words. The file was a text document titled, "For Future Investigators." The document read, I, Rebecca Torres, entered this investigation seeking rational explanations for 5 disappearances. I have found my explanation. though not the one I expected. These roads exist in spaces where our laws, physical, temporal, logical, do not fully apply. They are threshold space, liminal zones, pathways between what is and what shouldn't be. The travelers who vanish here are not victims. They are selections. The roads evaluators choose and collect those who resonate with their purpose. I do not understand this purpose, but I no longer need to. Understanding is not always meant for those outside the pattern. The document continued. To those who investigate after me, you will find no conventional answers. You will find only more questions. Accept this. Do not follow my path. Do not attempt to experience what I have experienced. The road has what it needs from me. But know this, every person who has vanished on these back roads made a choice, even if they didn't realize it at the time. They chose to turn onto an unfamiliar road. They chose to ignore warnings. They chose curiosity over caution. And in making those choices, they opened themselves to possibility. The final section stated, I made my choice. Now I live with the consequences. Or perhaps I no longer live at all. Perhaps I simply am, in a way that existence doesn't quite cover. The road is patient. It will wait for the next traveler. It always does. Drive carefully. Choose your paths wisely. Not all roads lead home. The document ended there. Rebecca had not typed it. The laptop's keystroke log showed no activity during the time frame when the file was created. Yet there it was, saved in her directory, written in her voice, expressing thoughts she had never recorded elsewhere. The most disturbing discovery came when investigators reviewed the footage from Rebecca's 4 cameras. 7 hours of recording. From the moment she entered the unmarked road until the cameras died. 3 of the cameras showed exactly what viewers of the live stream had seen to Rebecca driving. Turning around repeatedly, eventually parking and exiting her vehicle to walk toward an unseen crossroads. But the 4th camera, mounted on the rear window and facing back, showed something different. In this camera's footage, Rebecca never left her vehicle. She sat in the driver's seat for hours, completely motionless, hands on the steering wheel, eyes open and staring forward. At exactly 3:33 a.m. she smiled. Then she vanished. Not gradually, not stepping out of frame. She simply ceased to exist between one frame and the next, present, then absent, with no transition. The investigation into Rebecca Torres's disappearance is officially on Wednesdays. Her family has not given up hope. Search teams continue to monitor the area where her vehicle was found. But the crossroads where she vanished has become difficult to locate. GPS coordinates lead to different locations each time they're followed. The roads that meet there seem to shift, realign, reconfigure themselves when no one is watching. Forest rangers avoid that sector now. When asked why, they simply say the roads there are unreliable, that compasses don't work, that time passes strangely, that travelers who enter don't always emerge, and sometimes, late at night, rangers monitoring their sector maps notice something odd. A vehicle icon appearing on their GPS systems, traveling through areas where no roads exist. The identification matches Rebecca's vehicle. When they radio to investigate, they receive only static. And in that static, just barely audible, a voice that might be Rebecca's. Still searching, always searching, but not for a way out, for understanding. 5 disappearances, 5 backroads, 5 travelers who stepped into mystery and never returned. Marcus Webb, who mapped roads for a living and found one that mapped him instead. The Morrison family, who chose adventure and found a destination beyond any map. Emma Reeves, who knew every backroad until the roads knew her. David Park, whose kindness led him to pick up something that had been waiting for decades. And Rebecca Torres, whose search for answers became her final journey. When these disappearance locations are plotted on a map and connected in chronological order, they form a pattern. not a random pattern, but a deliberate one. The shape is ancient, a crossroads symbol found in dozens of cultures across history, a place where paths meet, where travelers choose their direction, where the boundary between here and elsewhere grows thin. Scholars of folklore recognize this symbol. It appears in Celtic mythology as a gateway to the other world, in African diaspora traditions as a meeting place with spirits, in Native American legends as a threshold space where the physical and spiritual worlds overlap. The symbol always carries the same warning. Crossroads are places of power and danger, places where choices matter, where the unwary can lose their way, not just geographically, but existentially. These 5 cases are documented, investigated, and officially unsolved, but they are not the only ones. Database searches reveal 17 other disappearances across the United States since 2000 that share similar characteristics. Abandoned vehicles in impossible locations, electronics malfunctioning identically, final communications referencing roads that behave strangely, and always that specific timestamp, 3:33 a.m. Traffic cameras on rural routes sometimes capture odd things. Vehicles slowing at intersections that don't exist. Cars turning onto roads that aerial photography shows aren't there. Headlights appearing in forests where no paths run. The footage is written off as glitches, technical errors, compression artifacts. Because the alternative, that roads exist in our world, that lead to somewhere else, is impossible to accept. The reports come in regularly. Most resolve normally drivers who took wrong turns, who misread signage, who let fatigue play tricks on their perception. They get back on track. They reach their destinations. They tell funny stories about getting lost. But some don't. Some join the pattern. Some become part of the legend of roads that walk, paths that choose, highways to nowhere. Interstate highways are safe. They are monitored, well-lit, heavily traveled. If travelers stay on major routes, they'll reach their destination without incident. But America is crisscrossed with thousands of miles of backroads, rural routes, county roads, service roads, forgotten highways that predate the interstate system. These roads wind through empty places, connecting towns too small to matter, passing through landscapes unchanged for centuries. And somewhere in that vast network of forgotten paths, there are roads that lead elsewhere. Roads that exist in the margins between mapped and unmapped, between real and impossible, between here and there. Most people will never find them. The odds are overwhelmingly in their favor. They'll drive rural routes their entire lives and never see anything unusual. But if they do, if they see a road that doesn't match their map, if mile markers start appearing in wrong order, if they pass the same landmark multiple times, if their GPS shows they're moving while parked, they should turn back. Turn back before they reach the crossroads, before they see what's waiting there, before the road decides they're meant to stay. Turn back before 3:33, because after 3:33, the road doesn't let travelers leave. 5 documented cases, 17 suspected ones. And somewhere tonight, another traveler is slowing down, seeing an unfamiliar sign, making the choice to turn onto a road that isn't on any map. The pattern continues. The road remembers. And it's always hungry for those who choose to wander. Drive carefully. Choose your paths wisely. Not all roads lead home, and some roads were never meant to be found at all. In the darkness of late-night rural highways, where headlights barely pierce the fog and mile markers blur past half-seen, there are places where the world grows thin. Places where roads don't just connect destinations, they become destinations themselves. Places where travelers who take a wrong turn might never find their way back to the world they knew. The 5 cases documented here share more than circumstances. They share a truth that investigators can't accept and victims couldn't escape. That some roads are alive in ways we don't understand. That they think and choose and wait with patience beyond human comprehension. They evaluate every traveler, sensing something in those who slow down, who hesitate, who feel the pull of curiosity stronger than the instinct for survival. Marcus Webb was selected for his precision, his need to map and understand every detail. The Morrison family for their openness to adventure, their willingness to choose the unknown. Emma Reeves for her confidence, that she knew every road, her belief that she could never be lost. David Park for his kindness, his inability to leave someone in need. And Rebecca Torres for her obsession, her determination to find answers even when answers didn't want to be found. Each made a choice. Each turned onto a road that welcomed them. And each discovered that some journeys have only one direction forward, into mystery, into a place where time moves differently, and geography follows rules that contradict everything we know about the world. The crossroads symbol formed by these five disappearances isn't a coincidence. It's a signature, a mark left by something that exists in the spaces between, something that has always existed in those spaces, feeding on the curious, the lost, the willing. It's been leaving this mark for centuries, long before jeeps and cell phones, back when travelers vanished into forests and never emerged. When wagons were found empty on trails that led nowhere, the symbol will appear again. 5 more points on a map. 5 more travelers, making choices they don't fully understand. 5 more families, searching for answers that can't be given. Because the roads are patient. They've been here longer than civilization. They'll be here long after highways crumble and cities fall. They're waiting in the dark places, the forgotten places, the places where maps have blank spaces and compasses spin without finding north. And they're waiting for anyone brave enough, or foolish enough, to turn off the main road and venture into the unknown. They're waiting at unmarked intersections, behind weathered signs that shouldn't exist, down dirt paths that appear only when they want to be found. They're waiting with headlights that shine from impossible places and voices that whisper from empty passenger seats. The road remembers everyone who's traveled it. Mark is still surveying, trying to map the unmappable. The Morrison family still walking hand in hand toward a destination they'll never quite reach. Emma still driving through endless night. David still listening to the old man's stories. Rebecca still searching for understanding. They're all there, in that space between worlds, in that place where roads lead but never end. They're not suffering. They're not trapped in the way we understand trapping. They're simply part of something now, something older and stranger than human comprehension allows. They've become elements of the road itself, landmarks for those who come after, warnings that will never be heeded, because for every person who reads their stories and vows to be more careful, there's someone else who thinks they'll be different, someone who sees an unmarked road and feels curiosity instead of caution, someone who ignores the warnings because warnings are for other people, for the careless, for the unprepared, someone who believes that understanding conquers mystery, that logic defeats the illogical, that roads are just roads and nothing more. Those people are already chosen. The road has already marked them. It's just waiting for them to make the turn, to see the sign, to feel the moment when reality shifts and the world beyond the headlights becomes something else entirely. It's waiting for 3:33 a.m., when the barrier between worlds is thinnest, when travelers lose track of where they are and how long they've been driving, when the road can reach out and pull them in. 5 cases, 17 suspected. How many more unreported? How many people vanish each year on rural backroads? Their disappearances attributed to accidents, to running away, to foul play, when the truth is something that can't be written in police reports or explained in official documents. How many families search for loved ones who are standing at impossible crossroads, waiting for something that will never arrive, in a place that exists only for those who've been chosen? The answer is unknowable, because the roads don't keep records. They don't file reports. They simply collect and wait, and collect again. They are part of the landscape, invisible until they want to be seen, impossible to map, because they exist partly outside the world that maps describe. They are the price of a nation, built on endless roads, on the promise that you can always keep driving, always find somewhere new, always escape whatever you're running from. But some escapes are permanent. Some roads don't lead to new beginnings. They lead to endings that never quite end, to journeys that continue forever without destination, to places where travelers exist in eternal transit, neither here nor there, neither lost nor found. So when the night is dark and the highway is empty, when the Jeep suggests an alternate route, or an interesting sign appears in the headlights, remember these 5 names. Remember Marcus Webb, Sarah and Michael Morrison and their children, Emma Reeves, David Park, and Rebecca Torres. Remember that they were real people who made simple choices that seemed reasonable at the time. Remember that they're still out there somewhere, on roads that don't exist on any map, in places that occupy the spaces between places. And when you're tempted to take that unmarked turn, to explore that unexpected detour, to see where that mysterious road leads, remember what's waiting at the end. Remember 3:33 a.m. Remember that some curiosity costs more than anyone should be willing to pay. The road is patient. The road is watching. The road is waiting. And it's always hungry for those who choose to wander. This is The Faint Whisper. Disclaimer. The Faint Whisper shares fictional horror and mystery stories told in a true feeling style for entertainment. These narratives are not presented as verified real events, and any resemblance to real people, places, or incidents is coincidental. Some visuals on this channel are created using AI generation tools. Viewer discretion is advised.